Hello everyone, my name is Zachary Conan. Today we are talking about a Versus video. It was suggested by you guys in one of my comments, and it was co-signed, and you know, a lot of you wanted to see this video. So here it is, Ingmar Bergman versus David Lynch. If you're new to the channel, well, you're probably about to hate me, but whatever, I guess get those dislikes ready, because here we go. I was reluctant to do this Versus video, mostly because anyone who knows this channel knows what I'm going to say. I'm going to say Ingmar Bergman. There, take all the suspense out of it. Ingmar Bergman is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, made some of the greatest films ever made, films that have shaped and molded my life, films that have helped me go through religious cinematic experiences. He's one of the most phenomenal artists to have ever lived, let alone one of the greatest filmmakers ever. And I hate, with a fiery passion, I hate David Lynch, with the exception of Blue Velvet, which I would give my highest rating to. I think Blue Velvet's a great film. A wonderful film. I think it plays on the tropes of film noir, subverts them beautifully, adds a lot of queer texturing to it, and I think it's wonderful. It's completely crazy and nuts, and it works. It's wonderful. Blue Velvet, great. Everything else, I hate David Lynch. I actually took a course in college. It was an absurdism course, but it was a thinly veiled, just a David Lynch class. My instructor was very knowledgeable. This is not like, I'm not lampooning or ridiculing the class itself, but David Lynch is a terrible filmmaker, and I learned in that class a quote. I think it was meant to instill some sort of awe in me, but it just made me think that David Lynch was a terrible, awful artist. David Lynch has said that no one has properly understood or analyzed one of his films before, and I guess to some people, that's the sign of an enigmatic filmmaker who is just impossible to solve, with just layers upon layers of mysteries to his cinema. To me, it just reeks of, you're just a bad filmmaker, man. You're just a terrible, terrible filmmaker. If you've been making movies for like 50 years now, and no one has properly understood any of them, that means there's something wrong with your messaging. That means that you are not capable of eloquently articulating yourself, of expressing yourself in any sort of way that's legible. David Lynch, I think, is almost deliberately overcomplicated. His films deal with surrealism. His films deal with trying to kind of express those Eastern ideas of the annihilation of self through this kind of surrealist language that he applies. And some would even say absurdist language, though absurdism and David Lynch are incredibly removed. Actually, absurdism is about existential inertia, while David Lynch is about surrealist posturing. There's a lot of posturing with David Lynch's films. I think that David Lynch is incredibly self-involved, grossly egotistical. His films are incredibly self-gratifying. Fans of Lynch are often fans of people like Jodorowsky, who was also a terrible filmmaker, even like Von Trier. Like, these are terrible, terrible self-gratifying filmmakers who have tricked you into liking their films based solely upon love of ego, or like some sort of ego bias. There's absolutely nothing to actually like about David Lynch. You can call him creative, you can call him inventive, but those creations and those inventions serve no greater purpose because his messages are illegible. He doesn't have the talent to actually express ideas properly. He doesn't have the talent. He's not shrouding them in mysteries and in confusing, albeit sometimes hypnotic or interesting visuals and kinetics. He's not just shrouding the truth. He doesn't know how to explain the truth to you. His most conventional films, like The Elephant Man or Dune or Wild at Heart even, are terrible movies, and I think prove that he can't tell a conventional story. He doesn't have that kind of just necessary talent to understand how film works. Now, reinventions and deconstructions are good, But, like, take Singing in the Rain, for instance. O'Connor had to dance on the floor before he could dance on the wall. He had to show you he knew how to do it normally before he went and turned it on its head and deconstructed it and kind of expanded the art form. David Lynch has never proved he could do something normally. And if you can't do it normally, you can't subvert it, you can't invert it, you can't reinvent it. Because you don't know what you're reinventing. So he just leaps to these surrealistic bounds, these surrealistic islands of what he probably considers rumination, and it fails every single time because it doesn't work. You can't deconstruct something if you never constructed it. That's my initial problem with David Lynch. That's probably my major problem with David Lynch, my overwhelming one at least, is that you cannot deconstruct something if you never constructed it in the first place. It's awful. Ingmar Bergman, I don't even feel like I should deign this verse as worthy of actual comparison. Ingmar Bergman took what already existed within film grammar and expanded on it and created some of the most powerful films ever. Films that have power and even isolated meanings, but not an overwhelming, overarching one. Films with the impression of meaning, with complete and total power. He's a master of religious imagery on film, and he's a master cynic. A master cynic. And masterful when it comes to the human condition. I don't believe David Lynch understands the social human condition whatsoever, whereas Ingmar Bergman, perhaps through the benefit of having a muse as emotive, as full of beauty, raw fucking beauty, as Liv Ullmann, he was able to completely explore and, oh my god, like, completely open my eyes to new realms of human understanding, of passion, and my neighbor is pressure washing his house? That's what you're doing right now? Can't he see I'm talking about David Lynch and Ingmar Bergman? This is very, very important. But, David Lynch, I can't get over him, and he also has a very toxic fan base, and I'm talking about the die-hard Lynch fans. I'm not talking about normal, healthy film fans who also consider David Lynch one of their favorite filmmakers, or at least a filmmaker that excites them or stimulates them. I'm talking about the die-hard Lynch fans who seem to believe that cinema started and ends with David Lynch. They are incredibly toxic. They are incredibly annoying, incredibly elitist, incredibly awful. They're just awful film fans. They make film bros seem, refined. David Lynch. But that's also, I think, what he fosters. I think he fosters this kind of intellectual elitism because his films posture as if they are intellectually sound, as if they are intellectually valuable, when in fact they are worthless. They are absolutely worthless because if there's any worth or value in it, David Lynch cannot express that. David Lynch does not know how to properly articulate himself. And that's not charming, that's not a sign of a complicated master, that's a sign of someone who's been doing this for decades, who still doesn't understand the fundamental bits of the cinema. You don't have to spell anything out for me, you don't have to spell it out for me, but you have to at least express something accurately, something with some sort of precision. There's absolutely no precision to David Lynch. In fact, he is precisely unimpressive. It's awful. It's awful. I despise David Lynch films. And I despise the people, the filmmakers who were inspired by David Lynch. Because it just feels like a Jenga thing. It's all just gonna fall over. You're inspired by a man who can't even express the qualities of inspiration in a film because he doesn't understand how to demonstrate anything with clarity. Anything. I'm not opposed to complicated films. I'm opposed to uncomplicated filmmakers who make believe that they are more interesting than they are. And David Lynch is certainly one of them. He'd be a far better B-movie director than he is an art house filmmaker. If he kind of removed himself from his ego and just made terribly acted, terribly shot, but kind of, you know, interesting on a certain level kind of B-movies, I would be much more kind to him. I would be much kinder to David Lynch. But no, he has to make these films that investigate the human condition and the annihilation of self and just fucking kill me, dude. Like, that's... You're an infant. I hate David Lynch. I'm sorry, this is a rather aggressive video, and I'm sure it's polarizing. I'm sure most people won't agree with me. But I'm not impressed by David Lynch at all, whatsoever. Like I said earlier, Blue Velvet is good. I view it mostly as a B-movie that's smarter than it should be. You know? I don't view it as anything beyond itself. Blue Velvet is a great film. It's a phenomenal film. I love Isabella Rossellini and Dennis Hopper, of course. Trademark performance, wonderful performance. I mean, if you take that many times at bat, eventually you'll hit a home run. Eventually. And maybe not because of, like, anything that you did, just, like, that many times. Trying, eventually you'll succeed. But Inland Empire, Eraserhead, Lost Highway, all of these things are horrible films. These are horrible movies that seem to have legions of mindless fans who hold them up as something far beyond themselves, when in actuality the reason that you're having so much trouble with it, the reason that you're mesmerized by it, or why you still don't think you figured it out, is because David Lynch doesn't have the talent, he does not possess the cinematic ability to properly tell his cinematic, like, ideas. He doesn't have the ability to translate his abstract thought into physical poetry on film. He does not have that ability. Ingmar Bergman, a nearly flawless director who shaped and sculpted the entire planet and world, and when he ventured into surrealism, like the intro to Persona immediately comes to mind, it is flawless. And it is incredibly self-aware. And that's what I need, that's what I yearn for. That's what I want. Ingmar Bergman easily takes this. This is no question. This is hardly a versus video, because I'm not going to disrespect Bergman enough to actually compare him to David Lynch. Bergman is worlds and leagues, universes, galaxies, infinitely beyond David Lynch. David Lynch can't even hold a candle to him. In the comments below, tell me why I suck. Oh, I mean, who would you choose? Also, do you feel I'm being too harsh on David Lynch? Because that's... I would say that's a possibility. But I don't think it's very likely. Also leave future ideas, future suggestions for versus videos, and I will get to them when I can, when I have the time. This one was suggested by a Child of the Flower. And like I said, a lot of you guys commented and said, like, yeah, this is a good idea. I think it's a good idea too, or else I wouldn't have done it. But it didn't really require a whole lot of thought on my end, because I genuinely despise and loathe one of these people, one of these players, and that's David Lynch. Thank you guys for watching and putting up with this rant. It turned into a rant. It wasn't supposed to be. I don't like rant videos, but this was a versus. This is a versus, and sometimes I can't be glowing. I can't be glowing all the time. So this is kind of a polarizing video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching.